Remember what it was like to be a kid? To explore and play. To roam free all day. In Jamestown, North Carolina, we get out of the grind and escape into the moment. People feel good here. Let loose here. Eat well here. Feel swell here. We go for a ride or an afternoon stroll. We cheer each other on. And go for the goal. Here, a treasured history meets the energy of a town on the rise. In a place with true heart and soul, and where we have our own special beat. Jamestown, North Carolina, where history and possibility meet.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. Before we get into the organizational section of this meeting to elect a chair and vice chair, I have a few announcements as the planning director. First of all, our code enforcement is now being covered by Alliance Code Enforcement. I just wanted y'all to know about it. Our code enforcement officer is Jeff Poindexter. He can be emailed at jeff@alliancecodeenforcement.com. As many of you know, Tai Cheek, the planning assistant, he has gone on to do bigger and better things over in the eastern part of the state where he's from originally. So we've gone back to using Alliance Code Enforcement for our code enforcement needs. Secondly, I would like to announce that this will be Jane Payne's last meeting. She has served on the planning board since 2020, first as an alternate and then as a regular member. She also served on the steering committee for the Envision Jamestown Comprehensive Plan and has been a crucial part of our planning board and the town. So thank you for your service, and we look forward to seeing you around.
I may start crying.
This time we'll move on to the election of a chair of the planning board. Each year, the planning board's rules of procedure requires that the board name a chair and vice chair for this year. Generally, that happens at the first regular meeting of each year, but today we are filling recent vacancies of chair and vice chair due to some resignations. The rules of procedure state that the staff shall call the meeting to order and conduct the meeting until the chair has been named. At that time, I will turn the meeting over to the chair, and they will conduct the election of the vice chair. We'll begin by accepting nominations from the floor for the chair of the planning board. The chair and vice chair can only be members of the regular in-town members. Nominations will be recorded in the order they were received. I will ask twice more for nominations before closing nominations. You'll hear me ask 3 times. At any time before closing nominations, a member who has been nominated may decline their nomination. At that time, I will call a vote on the first nomination. If the first nomination has a majority vote in favor, they will be seated as chair of the board. Once the chair has been named, they will take over the duties of chair and will conduct election for the vice chair position. So, at this time, I would like to call nominations for the chair of the planning board.
I'd like to nominate Denise Johnson, please.
A second.
Not quite a second, but we'll get there. I'll make a second call for nominations for the chair. Third and final call for nominations for chair. Seeing none, I will declare the nominations for Chair of the Planning Board as closed. We only have one nomination. All those in favor of Denise Johnson as Chair of the Planning Board for 2024, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Denise Johnson as your Chair. Mrs. Chairman, it is your meeting.
Thanks. All right, so now we're going to election of the Vice Chair of the Planning Board. Do I have a nomination for Vice Chair?
I'd like to nominate Hope Inge. I'll second that, if we need a second.
And do I ask, like you did for the second, third time? Okay, so do we have any other nominations for Vice Chair? And a third time, do we have any other nominations for Vice Chair? All right, so all in favor of Hope, I'm sorry, Hope, is it Ing? Hope Ing as Vice Chair, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay? All right, so we have elected Hope as our Vice Chair. Next is Katie will do roll call.
Yes, Denise Johnson,
Here.
Jane Walker Payne,
Here.
Hope Ing,
Here.
Darlene Fetty. Here. Dennis Scholl is absent. Brent Gomez,
Here.
Robert Kuhn,
Here.
Donald Dell,
Here.
Peggy Levi is absent. Susan Stringer,
Here.
Sherry Richmond,
Present.
and Councilmember Burgess is present. A quorum is present.
Okay. Moving on to approval of minutes for March 11th and April 8th from the Planning Board meetings. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Right. And now I believe Anna is going to come up and public hearing for the consideration of amendments to the land development ordinance.
Well, again, I have two updates for the land development ordinance. They're on page 24 of your packet in red writing is the updates. The first one was discovered during a recent rezoning request that there was an inconsistency in our sidewalk requirement. While 4 sections of our ordinance discuss sidewalks, almost all of them require them on both sides of public streets. Section 2.20-2 only required them along one side of the street. The update will change that verbiage to be sidewalks shall be required along both sides of new streets and strike exceptions for major thoroughfares where sidewalks are required on both sides. So this will just make it consistent with the rest of the ordinance so that we don't have any issues with if sidewalks belong on one side or both sides. One of the parts of our comprehensive plan speak about making a walkable community. So we want to definitely encourage walkable communities with sidewalks on both sides of the streets. This does keep the exemption for private streets, can only require one side of new streets. Those are streets that the town does not adopt in. This gives them, developers, a little more leeway for private communities and private parcels. And that is consistent with other parts of the ordinance. Any questions on sidewalks? The next section might be a little more confusing. Article 19 is the Watershed Protection Ordinance, and Section 19.5-2 gives exemptions to lots of records from October 1st, 1993 for any watershed except for Randleman, and January 1st, 2000 for watersheds in the Randleman watershed. So this section further goes on to give details, and this is on page 25 of your packet. The section further goes on to give details of the exemptions. This includes being able to build a house or building on a lot that's already been defined, so you're basically grandfathered in if you're in 1993 or 2000 to build on your parcel. Also allows you to add on or add small accessory buildings. We're not changing any of that. The only thing that the staff is requesting to change is as it goes further into that section, the word zone lot is used. Now, zone lot to planning means any lot that meets planning requirements. It meets the setbacks, it meets the lot size, and that doesn't make sense in a zoning exemption. We want it to fall back to that lot of record that's mentioned in section A. So the only change here is that instead of zone lot, we're clarifying that this applies to lots of record, not to zoned lots. So this is just cleaning up that watershed exemption area for B, C, and E to change the word zone lot to lot of record. We just don't want to have any confusion that zone lots would not be subject to requirements further along in Article 19. Any questions on that?
Is this, yes, is this zone lot versus lot of record, is that generally throughout the state, this change?
Well, it's just how we had it worded in our ordinance, but the exemptions are pretty standard.
It makes sense,
Yeah,
yeah. Thank you.
we just, I read this earlier in the year, looking at a subdivision, and got very confused, and thought, if I'm confused, I bet other people are too. So we just wanted to provide some clarity.
Very good.
All right, so we open now to public hearing to anyone that would like to speak. No one? Any discussion from the planning board on this? No? Okay, so we'll call for a motion to recommend the approval or denial of the proposed LDO amendments as presented.
So moved.
Second? Do you do the roll call or I do? Okay.
Sherry Richmond,
Yes.
Robert Kuhn,
Aye.
Brent Gomez,
Yes.
Hope Ing. Yes. Jane Walker Payne.
Yes.
Darlene Fetty.
Yes.
Donald Dell.
Yes.
Susan Stringer.
Yes.
The motion passes.
I make the motion that proposed zoning amendment be approved based on the following. The proposed zoning or amendment is consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan of the town of Jamestown. The planning board further finds that the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan because periodic updates to the zoning texts are necessary based upon changing conditions, regulations, and laws. Updates establish town compliance with regulating bodies and ensure that guiding documents are accurately operational for each of the current goals of the Comprehensive Land Development Plan. And the proposed zoning amendment is reasonable. The planning board considers the proposed zoning amendment to be reasonable because the report of the town staffing finding the proposed zoning amendment to be reasonable is adopted by reference. The planning board further finds that the proposed zoning amendment is reasonable because the request to update adds clarifying language to make the documents easier to interpret and apply. And the proposed zoning amendment is in the public interest. The planning board considers the proposed zoning amendments to be in the public interest because the report of the town staff finding the proposed zoning amendment to be in the public interest is adopted by reference. The planning board further finds that the proposed zoning amendment is in the public interest because it will assist the town in supporting necessary infrastructure for a safe, well-connected community.
A second to the motion?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right. Passes.
Nobody signed up for public comment.
Okay, no one from public, so I guess we call then for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, second? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right, meeting is adjourned.